Welcome back, everybody. I cannot believe it is August already, but it is, and here we are. And even though I was out of town for a week in July, I did manage to go through the ink in quite a few of my pens, and I want to go ahead and show you what we're going to be inking in August. When I was out of town, I got to go to a Daiso for the first time, and I'm sad that I don't have one near me, but I'm also glad because honestly, I could have bought the store, and I found this little box that's perfect for my currently inked little sheets that I started doing last month, and I'll probably decorate it in some way or another. So this is what I want to talk about. These two pens, this one, the Noodler's Ahab, I finished the ink in it. I finished the Kislap, and I'm going to be de-inking it and storing it. The converter that's on the inside is finally starting to slip, and it's not saying screwed on, and I end up with ink in the cap. Although I liked how it worked and I could probably mess with it. It does have the classic Noodler's smell issue that isn't super pleasant, and I have enough other pens, so this one is going to get stored. This Fountain Pen Revolution Himalaya version 1 is the kind that has the converter with a plunger that makes it very hard to feed ink back in if I need to. And I have enough other pens, and now that I'm done with this ink, I'm going to be cleaning out and I will be storing it. These two pens will be destashed. So that brings us down to 22 currently inked pens. I did, however, get 2 new pens that I inked, and they're just 2 little Wancai Majohn, similar to the one that was gifted last month. They are a kind of purple swirl pattern that looked a good bit different in the picture, honestly. And then this purple with just the few little sparklies in it that I purchased because it was, I don't know, $7 for Prime Day, and I couldn't resist. Both of these have had a Fountain Pen Revolution 5.5 Architect nib put on them, as well as I did change out the broad that I had in here to an Architect, so that's now an Architect. That one looks skinnier. In any case, so these are the 2 new pens that I'll be doing a sample for a little bit later. Another pen that I'm going to be cleaning and storing once the ink is gone is this little retractable Owasu that I had purchased last month to try out after using the retractable erasable pen that they manufactured. There's nothing wrong with this pen. It's fine. This is just an extremely fine point, and I don't reach for it. So I'm going to store that, bringing me down to 23. But I did put some ink back into the other Pilot Parallel that I have. That's a 2.4 millimeter. So this is inked now when it wasn't last month. So again, back to 24 pens. So the total number of pens has stayed the same. There are pens that I inked last month that I did not use up, and I'm going to lay those out right now. So that's 8 pens. We have the Majohn Wancai with the Tom Studio Forest Green. I actually really liked using this a lot. I like the ink more than I thought I would. It's just that these little pens, because they're eyedropper filled, hold a lot of ink. So it's going to take a little while to go through. I still have the Ladybug by Birmingham Pen Company, the Robert Oster Summer Storm, though I expect that this will run out shortly. The Soft Extra Fine Birmingham Pen Company Bearing Grease I still have in this pen. I'm trying to get through that. This I expect will be done shortly. This is the Private Reserve. These 2 Sheeners, this one in particular, I did not reach for very much because, as I predicted, they're so sheening. But those 2 are still inked, and then this one will take a while to go through too because I don't use the 6 millimeter Pilot Parallel very often. It's kind of a specialty nib. So highlights from last month. Let me go over that real quick. The inks that I really liked. This Octopus Fluids Phoenix was very pretty in that Architect nib. I liked the shading that this has, how it goes from like darker orange to a lighter orange, and the sheen is not aggressive. And because I just changed the nib in this pen, I found myself writing with it quite a bit just because it was new to me and I was enjoying it. I like the Summer Storm color quite a bit. I would like to try it in a broad, but I did like writing with this quite a bit. This I would put as probably my favorite pen of last month. I'm not 100% sold on this ink in particular. I like the color, but this nib, I really love this nib because it is like an architect nib. It has that same profile with the wider cross strokes and the narrower up and down strokes. It comes to such a point that there's something about it. It's very nice to write with. What I don't love and what I would put on my negative list, this pen is a piston filler without an ink window. And last month I decided that I will not be buying any more of those. I really dislike them quite a bit. I do like piston fillers. I do not like not knowing how much ink is in there. I don't like that at all. This was probably my favorite pen though. This Aurora Purple was a lot of fun in the Regalia Crossflex nib pen. It had a little bit of feathering problems sometimes. It was primarily if I had touched the paper quite a bit and wasn't careful about using a protective sheet like I should. But this bright color was a nice change, so that was fun. I'm still a big fan of this Tremol Coke in a double broad. The shading in this is just really, really nice, and I'm interested in trying some more of this ink. And then this wasn't really my favorite, but this was a surprise. I didn't expect to like this really at all, but I do enjoy writing with this green. It's a nice green, dark, without being too murky, and I liked writing with this pen quite a bit. Then the bottom of the bunch. Let's lay those out. These were the disappointments from July. And I think if I remember right, I predicted these in advance. So these were the least disappointing. I like both of these greens. I just really did not realize when I inked these that they were basically the same color. So very similar. And this one does not work very well in flex pens. I would have been much happier if I would have just done this color. So these were the least disappointing. This Wearing Go Lost, this was the last little bit of this ink that I had left, and I used it up, and it just did not write very well in this pen. I like it much better in a flex pen. I don't care for it in this pen, but I do like this ink, so that's probably the next least disappointing. Next on this list is this Narwhal double broad with this all sheen, no color ink. There's just barely any sections where you can see a color that isn't sheen. It's just an incredible amount of sheen, and I would much rather a sheen that's more like this, where you would see more of the color. This is just too much sheen. So I didn't reach for this as much as I could have. This is probably my second most disappointing, and my first most disappointing ink was this Waringal Romeo, because this swatch is really great. It's a gray. I love grays. It's a shimmer. I like shimmers. It's a subtle shimmer, which I also like, and it's got purple, and it's in one of my favorite pens. So this should be a slam dunk, right? No. It is not a slam dunk. It is not a slam dunk because even though I made sure that there was shimmer in the ink, in the cartridge, I made sure to twist it and distribute the shimmer in there. The shimmer, the writing shows basically no shimmer in anything. If you look extremely carefully, you might see a fleck or two, and this was consistent across all writing. This ink in this pen was a gray ink. Just gray. And I was very sad about it because this purple shimmer is so pretty. I think I'll try it in another pen and see if maybe it's just that pen. But I think I've had shimmers in there before and not had that problem. So I don't know what happened there, but this was the most sad situation for me. Okay, so that brings us to 15 pens. 15 pens to do a writing sample for. So I am going to get to work here. This is the Akaku Narwhal with the Regalia Crossflex nib in it. This is inked currently with Birmingham Pen Company's Bellflower, which is a purplish darker blue. Much darker than I thought it was when I inked it, but let us just do a little sample here. thought it would be pretty safe using a Birmingham Pen Company ink in this pen because they tend to be sort of wet. But I've had this inked for a couple of days now and I'm not really feeling it. It is a little railroady. I will go through it quickly because this pen puts down just a massive amount of ink. Not really worried about it, but it's not going to be a great experience in general, I don't think, from what I'm seeing so far. The color of the ink too, really in the vial looks a lot, it's hard to tell on here, but it looks a lot more like a purpley blue. Did not look this dark. And I probably should have swatched it first to make sure I wasn't doing just basically a blue-black, but you can see when I spread it around, it's more of a purpley dark blue. This is an ink, I think, that would be much better in a broad or an architect as opposed to a flex, especially a flex that's as flexy as this cross flex. Not super thrilled right out the gate. Next pen I'm going to do the ink for is this Gravitas pocket pen, stainless, with a Fountain Pen Revolution Architect nib on it. This is a pen that I rediscovered last month after taking out a titanium flex in it that I wasn't very happy with how it was working, and I used it quite a bit last month and I would like to use it again this month. In this Gravitas, I have it inked with Octopus Fluids Medusa. And that's writing very nicely. And it's a very pretty purple. Let's do a little swatch of it to see how it spreads out. It's a nice rich purple that's supposed to have some sheening in it. We'll have to see if that shows up when it dries in the writing. I don't think it does, but it does have some really nice shading in here while still being a very clear purple. So that's the Gravitas. Next up we have my Kaweco Sport Macchiato with a double broad nib, and I have inked this with Colorverse Hahoe Mask, which is a light brown. It's quite light, so let's see what that looks like. I've seen other people use this ink and I've really, really liked it. I don't think it's working in this pen. I think this pen is too dry for it and it's coming out extremely light. Colorverse inks, to me anyway, are some of the driest inks that I've ever used. And I don't have a lot of luck with them in general, unfortunately, because I like the whole science aspect and I like the fact that they include so much information about their ink and the pH and all of that. There's a few that have been great and then there's a few that do not work for me. And this might be one of the ones that isn't for me, but I mean, it's a great color. It's really pretty. I think I need to adjust the nib on this pen. I think it's dry, and then I think this ink is dry, and I think that's a very not great combination. Though I will say this is more of an orange tone than I would normally like in a brown. I'd want something a little grayer or a little dirtier. This is kind of yellow or orange. So we've got a couple of not great ones to start, but we'll keep on going. Next up is one of my Fountain Pen Revolution pens. It is the one that I have the titanium flex nib from the Gravitas on. This is a Himalaya version 2. And in this pen, I have been Demons from their feline line, Kitten Paws, which is a pinkish brown. I mean, I have to like this ink just because of the name. It's so cute. And I love cat and dog themed ink collections. I think they're very, very cute. I respond to them well. And this brown, compared to the last, is much more of a tone that I like, whereas this has got this orange. This is more grayish tone. Kitten Paws. So sweet. I think it'd be more pink though. Aren't kitten paws usually pretty pink? It's been a while since I've been able to have a cat. So the swatch shows more pink than is showing in the pen. So it'd be interesting to see if there's a pen that I could use with this that would bring this pink out more. So that's the Fountain Pen Revolution with the Titanium Flex Nib and Van Dieman's Kitten Paws. The next pen is going to be this Kaweco AL Sport with a double broad nib. And this is inked with Octopus Fluids Dragon, which is a blue-green. Kind of matches the pen, though I'm not super matchy-matchy. When the color is this bold on a pen, I feel more odd putting like a brown or a yellow or something that's super different. This is a really pretty teal color that matches the pen pretty well, and then also has some sheening in it, which we'll, I'm sure, see more in the swatch, especially after it dries. All right, let's spread this around a little bit. So it's a nice saturated dark teal color that does, even though it's not dry yet, have some nice shading in there too. This one I like. Okay, that's the Kaweco AL Sport Octopus Fluids Dragon. Moving on, we'll go on to the Hongdian Long Knife Rabbit N23 pen. And in this pen, we have this paper plume, red beans and rice. I really like this ink a lot. The last time I used it, I don't know, it was a little frustrating. I think it's a little dry, but this pen writes really well. All right, that's acting a lot more like I want it to act in this pen. Anyway, I like the cap on these bottles. It's like a wax seal. I think they're kind of neat. I think they did a really good job of capturing that kidney bean color with this ink. This kind of shading is what I remember liking about it. Next up is my favorite pen for last month. This is a PenBBS $4.95 piston filler with a number 2 calligraphy nib on it, which is an architect, but it's a very pointed architect. The ink I'm using in this pen is Sailor Manyo Fuji. This is a chromo shader. I have to see how that dries, but so far the shading is really nice, and that's that purplish blue color. I've had a really hard time finding one that I like that writes well. I know there's a ton of them out there, but the right one has eluded me. And in this pen anyway, it is not dry at all, which is great, because chroma shaders can be a little dry, and I've had issues with this particular color being dry from some other companies. It has that melted grape popsicle color, like sort of slightly grungy purple with blue. I like that so far. I'll have to see how that dries as well. I think I could put almost any ink in that pen and like it though. The next pen that I'm going to write with is the Lamy Safari with a 1.5 stub nib. I generally keep a shimmer ink in this pen, and it usually lasts me a while because I don't actually write with this pen. I use it for titles on journal pages. So this one doesn't pop up every month. And the ink that I have in this right now is Van Dieman's Moonlit Lake, which is a turquoise blue with a turquoise blue shimmer. And because this is a shimmer, I should probably agitate this a little bit so we can get some of the shimmer to show up. This teal color gets me every time. I love this color. It's bright without being obnoxious, but it's almost like a sheener with shimmer because you can see it's collecting in certain spots of the letters. So that one is a lot of fun, and it's popping out more as it dries. That's really interesting. All right, let's see what it does in a swatch. Let me get this shimmer mixed in pretty well. It's definitely not a red shimmer, so that's got to be a sheen. Is this a sheening shimmer ink? It's a lot going on. I may need to do more than just titles with this if that's how it's going to look, because that color is great. It is quite saturated. Swatches are a little messy tonight, sorry. Can't wait to see what that looks like when it dries. That is great. Then next up I have my Fountain Pen Revolution Jaipur version 2. This is the pen I always keep gray ink in for journaling and just general writing in my planner. Last month I had an Iroshizuku ink in it, and this month I have a Kaweco ink. I like their ink bottles. This is Smoky Gray. And this is the reason why I don't use this ink more. Price is great. I like the tone of this gray. It does railroad just a little bit in a flex pen. It's not terrible. It's not all the time, but it does consistently railroad, which is frustrating. In my gray ink quest, this is one of the ones I bought. I'll use it up. It's not terrible, but it's not. It's like a 6.5, maybe a 7. I do like how you can kind of see it here, how it's so very purple. The next pen that I'm going to use is another Fountain Pen Revolution Jaipur version 2 with an Ultraflex nib. And this has Pennonia Lilac in it. Pennonia, Lilac, Orgona. I just thought it said organza. I don't know why. All right, let's see what this looks like. That is a serious shader. And that's getting into the bluish purple again, though that one I think is a little more blue. I have a thing for lilacs. Don't grow where I'm at right now, but they were a big part of my childhood. It's one of the things I miss most. My neighborhood growing up had just a ton of lilacs everywhere, and it was quite cold there, so spring showing up was a big deal. It's not the case where I'm at now. All right, let's spread this around and take a look. Oh, it's got like a little gray in it too. I'm a sucker for that. Yeah, I like that one a lot. I have 2 bluish purples that are making me happy this month. That's pretty impressive. Up from my all-time high of 0. I'm going to do another fountain pen revolution. This is a Himalaya version 2 with an Ultraflex nib on it. This is inked with Birmingham Pen Company Railroad Spike. Oof, not great. Not great. Now, so is it not great because of the ink? I'm leaning towards thinking this flex pen does not work quite right. So the next time I ink it, I think I need to try going with an ink I know works well in flex pens. The last few inks I put into that pen I've said were dry, but I don't know if it's the ink. However, I do like the color of this. It's a dark gray with a green cast to it, and it looks like it could have some shading. The color is really, it's sort of like bearing grease, but without the dirt. It's a nice dark gray though, without being black. Really would be very business appropriate. And it's nice to have inks like that on occasion. This is a Fountain Pen Revolution again, Jaipur version 2, Ultraflex nib. This has Van Dieman's Purr in it. And that's this color right here. This is a pink, a very red leaning pink. All right, let's do a swatch drop. This is one I think I'd like to see in a broad. I think it could do some interesting things in a broad. Yeah, that is a very bright, very red base pink. Definitely pink, definitely very little purple in there. Definitely not like this. I mean, look at how different those are. They're both bright, but this almost looks red compared to this, or this almost looks purple compared to that. That's a nice alternative. That's a kind of pink I don't see that often. It's pretty cool. This is a black Kaweco Sport, and I have inked it with Troublemaker, Moon River. It's a chroma shader, and this is a double broad nib. That is reading, well, I always say that before it dries, so it's reading much grayer than I remember, but it is a chroma shader and it's already starting to change, and I need to stop giving my opinion of these before they dry because they completely turn into something else. Let's do a swatch of that. Take this tape off, give myself a little bit of room. All right. So it's a chroma shader. It's gray, but it also has a slight greenish tint, and it has a pink or purple base. And as it dries, you can see when I first wrote with it, it was quite gray, and now it's starting, some of those pink tones are starting to come out. Troublemaker has some great chroma shaders. It's going to be new pens, or pens that were not inked last month. One of the pens that was not inked last month, I don't have a vial to show you because I used up the entire sample. I always like to do that. This is a Pilot parallel 2.4 millimeter pen I use for titles and cards. It's got a shimmer in it, and I'm not real happy with the shimmer I put in it, but it is Ferris wheel press, Plaited gold Tress. It's going to be very light and hard to read. Yeah, I mean, I can't even read that, and I'm not looking at it through a camera, so I'm sure it's terrible for you guys. I'm using it up, so let me open it up to get a swatch. Sometimes lighter inks like this work great in a Pilot Parallel. It just brings out the ink and makes it a lot more interesting, and sometimes you just can't read it, and this is one of those you just can't read it cases. Unfortunately, but it'd be good for adding little decorations. Wrote like this swatch, it might not be too bad, but it writes so much lighter. The shimmer is very pretty. It's just not legible, which when I write is kind of one of the things I want most of the time. All right, and then I have two Majohn Wancai pens. These are new, and I will start with the purple sparkle, and in this pen I have swapped out the nib for a Fountain Pen Revolution Architect, and I also completely used up the ink that's in this pen, both of these actually, so I don't have a vial to show you, but this is Tom Studio Damson, which is a dark purple. I think the last pen I had this ink in was a Asvine, and it wrote extremely wet in that pen. But let's steal some ink out of here to do a swatch. Let's spread this about. It's quite a bit darker. That pen is writing very dry. I'm gonna have to play with that. The other pen that I have that's also a Wancai, Majohn Wancai, is this purple swirl that looked a lot prettier in the picture. See, do you guys have this problem with the random resin thing? You look at it and then you get it and you're like, that does not look like the picture. I want the one in the picture, not this one with the weird random. Anyway. It's just a little Wancai. It's okay. All right, and the ink that's in here, I also completely used up the sample, so I don't have a vial, but it's Birmingham Pen Company's Magnolia Mirage. And that's an ink that I know I like quite a bit in Flex pens. So I wanted to see what it's like in this has also been changed to an Architect, a 5.5 Architect. And that is why I really like to try inks in different pens, because this ink in this pen, it's fine, but it is not doing anywhere near the really cool stuff it does in a Flex pen. It's okay. It writes well, but it's just flat. That's crazy how different that is. There are inks that are fantastic in Flex pens, but not in other pens, and there's inks that are fantastic in a Broad or an Architect, but are terrible in a Flex pen. And then there are inks, very few inks. It's a rare ink that just really looks great in both. I'll show you some examples in a second. That's why I really try to at least test my inks in a Flex pen at least once, and then because I primarily like to use Broads and Architects, one of those. See, this is doing more like what I see, this weird color. I mean, I guess it's doing it a little bit right there, but it's almost entirely just a pink. Let me show you what I'm talking about. The Birmingham Pen Company Magnolia Mirage is an ink that is amazing in a flex pen. It ends up doing a halo effect where all of the letters almost look like they're outlined with a slightly darker ink color and the inside is lighter, along with some shading. And in a broad, or this is actually an architect nib, this is pretty boring, honestly. It's got some shading, which is nice, but this is just kind of a pink. It isn't doing any of the same sort of halo effect that's over here on this. It's just a pink. So this is, again, this ink, the Birmingham Pen Company, great for flex pens, okay for like a broad or an architect, but not anything special. So this ink is a heavy shader, and I found that in any sort of flex pen like this right here, it was very dry, and I was able to get some shading. Anyway, it's very dry. There was a lot of railroading. There is some shading in some of these areas, but this same ink, it works just beautifully in a double broad. It doesn't have any of the writing issues that I had with the flex. It has the really nice shading. You can see it even more on this, where it's got shading. So this is an example of an ink that is excellent in a broad or a double broad, but I don't like in a flex pen. And then we have what I consider sort of a unicorn, and that's an ink that I'm just as happy in a architect or a broad nib as I am in a flex. And a good example of this is Dieman Deep Magenta. The reason being, in a broad nib or an architect, it comes across with some really nice shading without looking washed out at all. It's still a pretty dark pink, and the flow is nice. And then in a flex, I don't have railroading issues. It comes across as a little bit darker pink, but still a bright pink as opposed to getting muddy or difficult. It has a little bit of the haloing that I like in a flex pen, and it's a very rich color. So this is an example of an ink that I love in almost any different kind of pen. This is where we're at with the August currently inked. I'm pretty excited about a lot of these. I think it's a good selection for me to work with this month. And there's a few things that I see that might be misses, but the inks that were left over from last month were this one, the gray flannel, the Triumph Tulip Twinkle, the Summer Storm. So 1, 2, 3, these two sheening inks, and this Ladybug ink right here. So this, let's just take those out real quick because I'm not going to talk about how good or bad those would be. This Birmingham Pen Company was left over too. And Summer Storm. Oh, nope, that's an old one too. This was left over from last month too. Okay, these are the new inks. These are the newly inked pens for this month. And these are the pens that were carried over from last month. So I'm going to put those aside. The colors that I'm excited about, let me pull those out. It's going to be these. Do 4. And the ones that I'm not as excited about, I think it'll be these 4. And these are all, yeah, you know what? I'm going to have to say 5. Just to give you some close-ups. Troublemaker Moon River, after it's dried, definitely goes pink and not gray. This Kitten Paws does go more pinkish when it dries, and it seems to work pretty well in a flex pen. This Still, I just don't understand how this ink is just kind of meh and abroad, but it's still a pretty pink. So there's nothing wrong with this. It's just so close to the other ink, the Van Dieman's Moonlit Lake, and that one has more going on. But I do like the shading, the darkness down here, and then the lighter up top, and the sheen does pull through in the writing a little bit. This, I'm apprehensive about actually. It's a pretty purple. There's a lot of sheen here. It's not pulling through here at all. So that's kind of disappointing. Maybe on different paper. This doesn't really have any shading. It's reddish pink. I'm not really a color I'm super excited about, but maybe it'll grow on me. This railroad spike is kind of like a light black. It's not even really gray. And this pen is not behaving very well. This could probably go in the less excited about pile. This would be at the bottom, more of the bottom. All right. And the ones that I'm more concerned about, this is just not my color, I don't think. I doubt I'm going to reach for this very much. It's so much of an orange based brown, and that's just, I like a burnt sienna color. I want it to be darker than this though, not like a light. It's going kind of peach. This is just, I'm not really a fan of this color. So that's kind of on the lower end. This is just reading as like a blue-black in this pen. It also tends to railroad. I think I got a little overconfident with this pen and just trying brand new ink after the success I had with the Aurora purple last month. It went to my head and I just went with whatever, and I'll go through this pretty quick. And there is some nice shading up here. It's not a complete disaster, but I don't see much of this kind of purplish tone in here, and the performance is a little sketchy. This, I need to learn not to put in flex pens. It railroads. This is not a good ink for flex pens. It's probably just fine for an architect or something like that. This is too light to read and not a big, huge fan of yellow. And it is getting glitter all over everything. So I may break a lot of my rules and may de-ink that. We'll see. I'll let you know next month if I finally de-inked a pen. This is the pen's fault. I did just floss it. It does seem better. Floss the tines. Hopefully that'll help. This is just, it's like a plummy, I can't really say on this one. I have to wait and see how it does now after I flossed it. And then these four, I've always really liked this ink. The tone of the red really does bring to mind kidney bean color, the shading in here, here, and just even in the swatch. I really like this ink. These two are very similar. I'm going to say that I prefer this one slightly because it's slightly darker, but it could be because it's in a flex nib. And this one is in an architect, but I like both of these. Spoiler, already ordered a bottle of this though, because this has got that halo effect that I really like. So I'm excited for that. I guess I'm kind of excited for Moon River. I haven't used it in a while and I forgot how just a fun color. This is a sheening shimmer ink, and I don't know that I have any others. It does have a shimmer that is very complementary to the tone of the ink, but you can see the sheening underneath. I'm sure this one, no, not as bad as the Ferris wheel press, but it does. It's got a substantial amount of shimmer in there. If you don't like shimmer, obviously not, but I think that's just really pretty. I think that would be such a nice color for invitations or even holiday cards. That is where we're at. 24 pens, 24 different inks. Thanks again for stopping by. I really appreciate it. It's good to see y'all again. And I hope to see y'all again soon. Bye.